Hey there, this is Zach from MyCodeTeacher.com. Today I'm going to teach you a little bit about the basics of Objective-C methods. So let's go ahead and get started. Methods are always declared with a plus or a minus sign. Now, the plus or the minus is going to depend on two different situations. We'll declare the plus sign if the method is going to be static, if it's not going to use any instance variables within the object. We declare a method with the minus sign if the method uses or references an instance variable. Assuming we're going to be referencing an instance variable or using one in our method, we're going to go ahead and use this example as if we're declaring a method with the minus sign. So for example, when you declare a method, you have to put the return type and then the method name. So if we were using an integer, we would put an integer inside the parentheses and then name our method whatever we wanted. Now, if we were going to use parameters, we would put the return type, the method name, and then after the method name, we would include the type of our parameter and then the name of our parameter. Now, with two parameters, it gets a little tricky because we actually have to put a description before the second parameter. What I mean by that is, take a look at this example. You have your return type, your method name, then you've got your parameter 1 type and your parameter 1 name. Then after that, you have to actually give a description. Doesn't matter what it is, just put a description there, and that's going to be basically saying what the parameter 2 is going to be used for. You can give it any description that you want, but generally it would make the most sense to give a description of what it's being used for. Now, when we declare our methods, we have to declare them in the header file. The definition is actually going to go in the .m file. Calling a method is pretty simple. We're going to use left brackets, and we're going to call the object that we're trying to call the method from, and then we call the method name. That's assuming there are no parameters in this method. If we were going to have one parameter, same format here, except we use a colon and then the parameter immediately following the method name. If we have two, this time again with the description, we'll call the object, the method name, pass in the parameter 1, and then type in the same description that we called when we made the original function, when we declared it, and then pass in the second parameter. This will all get easy when we work on it in code, so let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to open up Xcode here. We're going to actually create a pretty simple app today. We're going to use a function that's going to pass in 3 arguments, and they're all going to be strings, and we'll pass that right into a function which will set 3 UI labels in Interface Builder to be what we had passed in as arguments for the strings. So let's go ahead and create a view-based application, and we'll call this methods. Now, right off the bat, let's go ahead and open up our resources and open up the methods view controller so we can put in our 3 UI labels and a button to execute a function. We're going to put in label 1, just kind of drag that out a bit here. Now you can press the Command D to duplicate a label, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to put a button in here. We're going to call this display strings. Okay, let's go ahead and save, and we're going to go ahead and go back to our Xcode here, and we're going to work in the methods view controller.h file. And so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to declare 3 IB outlets, so we're able to change the value of the strings. So we're going to go ahead and call IB outlet, and we'll make UI label, and we'll call string 1. We'll call this UI label string 1. Make the second IB outlet. We'll call this string 2. Third IB outlet. String 3. Okay, so we've declared our IB outlets. Now let's go ahead and declare 2 functions. We're going to call one function called change strings, which is going to be executed from this display strings button. When we press this, we need to execute a function that's going to actually change the labels here. So we're going to use the minus sign because we're going to actually be referencing instance variables here, and we're going to call this type IB action. Now actually an IB action is really just a voided value, but when we put the type of IB action, Interface Builder is automatically going to recognize this function, and you'll be able to call this function based off of the event that you select from the Interface Builder menu. I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So let's go ahead and call this change strings, and we'll end it with the semicolon. We have now declared, we have promised to the compiler that there's going to be a function called change strings. Now we haven't written the definition for it yet, but we have defined it. So let's go ahead and save here, and I will show you in Interface Builder that this function now exists. So we'll go up to Window, Document, and this function will appear in Files Owner. Now if you come here in our inspector, come to the Controller Connections tab, and you'll see the received actions, change strings, is exactly what we have down here. So now if we drag from this circle to the button and we let go, a whole bunch of events pop up here. Now what we want to do is we want to hit the touch up inside option, and that's because when the user touches anywhere in the button, it's going to call the function that we have tied in right here into the methods view controller. Okay, so we've got that set up now. Let's go ahead and create our second function, and this is going to actually be designed to set the properties of the UI labels. So we're going to make this of type void because it's not going to return any specific value, and we're going to call this set strings. Now it's going to pass 3 parameters. Remember, the first one immediately comes after the name of the function. This is going to be type NSString, and we'll just go ahead and call this string1. It's usually a good idea to be a little bit more specific, but we really don't have any purpose for these strings other than to display how parameters and arguments work. So we're just going to call them string1, string2, and string3. But in your program, I would make the names of the parameters relevant to what you're doing. So we've got string1. Now we have to describe what the second parameter is going to be. So I'm just going to say with string2, doesn't really matter what you put for a description, and we'll put NSString, and we'll call this string2. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit larger here. And last but not least, we'll put in the third description with string3. So that is our description of our parameter 3, NSString, and we're going to call this string3. And go ahead and end the declaration with a semicolon. So we now know that this function, we've promised the compiler that these two functions are going to exist in the .m file. So let's go ahead and go into the .m. It's usually a lot easier if you just copy what you have, and then you can start working from there. So I'm going to go ahead and paste these, and we will work with change strings first. So go ahead and delete the semicolon, and we'll open and close our function. This is where our definition is going to take place. So in change strings, what we're going to do is, remember, this is the function that's called when you press the button. So all we really need to do is call the set strings function and pass in the parameters. So let's go ahead and create 3 parameters. Now we could easily just type in a string to the parameter, but we're actually going to declare 3 local variables. Now take a note here that the variables I'm declaring in this method are local to this method only. They can only be used or accessed in this method. They can't be called in any other method other than this one. So just take note of that. We've got NSString, and we'll call this string1. And we'll set that equal to myCodeTeacher. Now we've got an NSString, string2, and we'll set that equal to is, and we'll declare a third variable, and we'll call this string3, and we'll set that equal to awesome with an exclamation point. So now we're going to call the setStrings function, and we could do that by starting with the left bracket and putting the object name. In this case, the object is going to be self, and the method name is setStrings. Now as you can see here, Xcode actually fills in the rest of the function for us. So we can actually just go ahead and use their template that they gave for us, which is what we designed, and we'll just fill in the parameters. So here's the descriptions with string 2, with string 3, and we'll just have to plug in the arguments. So let's go ahead and plug them in. So we've got string 1 as the first argument, string 2 as the second argument, and string 3 as the third. End it with a right bracket and a semicolon, and the function was successfully called. So we've now given the definition for the changeStrings method. Let's go ahead and give a definition for the setStrings method now. Go ahead and get rid of the semicolon, come down here, open and close the bracket. Now we're almost done here. So let's go ahead and we will take string 1, which is a property that we defined in the header, and we're going to use a method called setText. Now as you can see, this is actually a method defined in the UI label class, and it's calling this method just as we did above here, except it only requires one parameter. So our text is going to be string 1, and that's done. That's it for string 1. Now we're going to call string 2, setText, only has one parameter, string 2, because this is what's being passed in. We've passed in string 1, and it's going to call the setStrings method, and when the method is called, these are going to be what the values are that are inputted into the function. So string 3, setText, and string 3, because that's what our parameter is, and the argument is what is setting the parameter right here. So go ahead and save, and all that we should have to do now is in the nib file we'll just have to set the outlets of each label. So we've got string 1, string 2, and string 3. String 1, drag that to the first string. String 2, drag that to the second string. And string 3, drag it to the third. Now go ahead and save. And let's go ahead and build and try it out. So here we go, installing it. And we've got our 3 strings here. Now we'll click this function, and there you have it. We now have 3 strings that were changed by the arguments that were passed into the setStrings function. It's actually pretty simple, and the more you get used to writing and creating functions, the easier it becomes. This is going to conclude my basic methods tutorial in Objective-C. My name is Zach from mycodeteacher.com. Thanks for watching.